Welcome to the Hybrid Attorney Podcast. We are your hosts, Austin Marler and Devin Thorpe. I am Devin Thorpe.
And I'm Austin Marler.
And the purpose of this podcast, in summary, is to discuss things such as power systems, history, workflow, productivity, and just life in general through the lens of the law. We are currently two practicing attorneys in the state of North Carolina. And today's topic is going to be none other than the world infamous subject titled burnout. So, burnout is something that it's not even an argument that needs to be made. It's something that a lot of Americans face on a day-to-day basis, even though, we've moved out of the factory jobs and more towards knowledge work sector related jobs where we're sitting in cubicles all day or on our laptops all day coding or calling clients or doesn't really matter. I mean, burnout is something that permeates through every single career that you can have, regardless of retail or knowledge sector working. And so, Austin, what are your initial thoughts just generally if you had to define what burnout is? How would you define it?
Burnout, I guess it starts with whenever you're experiencing burnout and defining it, it's that feeling you have in the morning where you don't even want to get out of bed, where you've got a bunch of things on your task list, you got a bunch of things on your schedule, on your plate, and you don't even want to get out of bed to start it. And it not only affects your work or your work life, it affects every aspect of your life. It makes it hard to go to the gym, makes it hard to want to cook for yourself. It, it's an all-encompassing feeling of I don't want to do anything, as kind of just a paralysis is how I would define
As a currently
burnout.
practicing attorney, when is the last time that you yourself experienced burnout? It's almost a comical question to ask.
Uh, I don't know if you can even say last experience. It seems like I'm still currently experiencing it. On my quarterly review, the biggest thing was, "Hey, buddy, you can't get burnout. You can't keep keep down the path you're going. You can't keep spinning your wheels on everything. Sometimes you got to know when to move on and start attacking other things." So it seems like I'm still in that burnout phase,
And
self-induced.
before we get into the meat of the discussion and my thoughts on it, what bef- what is it that you do whenever it is that you're feeling burnt out to at least attempt to lift yourself up out of that feeling, that overwhelming feeling of burnout?
Sometimes it's something super small. Like if if I can get into the office and I can get one super small task done, I can use that to be productive for the rest of the day. It kind of gets the ball rolling. If I can do something like extend a walk with my dog Bambi, even doing something as small as that, I'm like, okay, I've done something productive today, and it's easier for me to get in the mode. Okay, let's just keep this ball rolling. But if I've just got to do something small to get it started, something as small, even some days, just make my bed look nice when I wake up. Like that's the cliche thing everyone says first thing you do in the morning. I don't do it every morning, but sometimes I just need a small task. I'm like, yep, did that, or I'll put in a grocery delivery order. Like, okay, we got the ball rolling today. We can keep going.
And so going off of that, I'll also preface this conversation that we have by saying everyone's different because I am not someone who makes their bed on a daily basis, and I've heard a million times that cliche, make your bed in the morning. There's entire books written on it that rely on it for the subject of productivity and everything like that. I'm someone who, I don't think it's analytical thinking, or it's just the way that my brain is wired, where I'm essentially, I think to myself, why would I make this bed when I'm going to unmake it tonight when I get back in? And so all that's to say, everyone is different and everyone experiences burnout differently. But the reason why this is a subject that is on, I guess, my heart to talk about is because Austin and I, in creating this podcast, have taken it upon ourselves to where each one of us will be reading a certain book on a certain subject at the same time. So I read one book, he reads a different book, but those books are not the same. And using this podcast, we're going to discuss some of the principles that are mentioned in those books. The most recent book that I read is called Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. You might recognize his name as an author. He also wrote um, a book called Deep Work that was a New York Times bestseller. But essentially, the title of this book captured my eye because of its title, and that was Slow Productivity. Before I get into what that means from the book itself, Austin, when you hear the word slow productivity, um, what comes to your mind?
Before I even answer that, I've got a perfect example of what burnout may do. Uh, let's see, this Christmas tree, we're at the end of February. It's not a hard task to put away some ornaments and take down a Christmas tree, but clearly I've not set myself to do that after work one day or on a weekend. So that is a clear example in this video of how burnout can affect your life. But when I hear the word slow productivity,
You just ousted yourself.
I mean,
Probably probably anyone who does choose to watch this video is doing so maybe without even looking at the video, like, they just have it in their headphones listening to it, and you just called everyone's attention to hyperfixate on that Christmas tree. Anyway, go on.
well, either way, people are going to be like, when did they film this bad boy? Why is there a Christmas tree up? What is
Yeah, we
going
actually
on?
we actually film all of our episodes 2 or 3 months in advance and then release them to the public.
But when I hear slow productivity, it kind of has almost a negative connotation to it in my mind, like just based off the words themselves. Like, yeah, you're doing stuff that you need to get done, but it's at a pretty slow pace. And sometimes like that before looking a little bit into the book that you were reading, that I would 100% describe myself as a slowly productive person. I don't get the things done quickly. I spin my wheels. I take too long to do tasks at times. So, but I feel like I'm constantly moving the ball forward. Uh, so that's what I think of when I hear slow productivity.
Okay. It was a unfamiliar topic to me as well, which is, I think, because we work as attorneys and burnout is something that is very prevalent in our field of work. It's what caused me to want to pick up this book and read it, and it was a good book. I did not agree with all of its um, conclusions or recommendations, but and I'll get to that as we get to certain points discussed in the book. But I want to start off with this quote that is from the book. I'm reading it. I had it typed out beforehand to kind of frame what what it is the author believes slow productivity to be. So listen to this quote. In knowledge work, when you agree to a new commitment, be it a minor task or a large project, it brings with it a certain amount of ongoing administrative overhead. Back and forth email threads needed to gather information, for example, or meetings scheduled to synchronize with your collaborators. This overhead tax activates as soon as you take on new responsibility. As your to-do list grows, so does the total amount of overhead tax you're paying. Because the number of the hours in the day is fixed, these administrative chores will take more and more time away from your core work, slowly slowing down the rate at which these objectives are accomplished. At moderate workloads, this effect might be frustrating, a general sense that completing your work is taking longer than it should. As your workload increases, however, the overhead tax you're paying will eventually pass a tipping point, beyond which logistical efforts will devour so much of your schedule that you cannot complete old tasks fast enough to keep up with the new. This feedback loop can quickly spiral out of control, pushing your workload higher and higher until you find yourself losing your entire day to overhead activities. Meeting after meeting conducted against a background hum of unceasing email and chat. Eventually, the only solution becomes to push actual work into ad hoc sessions added after hours, in the evenings, in early mornings, or over the weekend, in a desperate attempt to avoid a full collapse of all useful output. This line right here is key. You're as busy as you've ever been, and yet hardly getting anything done.
I mean, I can relate very much so to that quote right there, especially like the first half of it, where administrative tasks can distract you from what you're doing and make it harder to complete something that you're working on because there's always going to be all these little distractions coming from every which angle that that can take you away from the major task that you're working on at that time.
Reminds me of this. I had a discussion with my supervisor, Eric, and about this video I had seen where I'm someone who does not like texting or emailing, stuff like that. And it talked about how certain people are adverse to what's called infinite tasks, because when you start an email thread or you're text messaging someone, that is a task that even though you check it off, it's not done because you're going to get a response at some point and that's going to need to be replied to. And in our field, especially with emails, keeping it oftentimes feels like keeping my inbox down to zero is the most impossible task in the world, because every time that I send something out, it might not be immediate, but I'm essentially opening up a new task for myself in the down the road, just kicking the can further to have to reply to the response. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And going off that, like this is a conversation that I had with Ashley early on in one of our first meetings. I'm like, as soon as I get a portal communication, email notification, it's like I stop whatever task I'm doing and I hyper fixate on whatever that is. So she kind of suggested a strategy where I block off time in my schedule to where, like right now on my schedule, if you look every day, 4 to 5, check portal, check email, and doing that has helped me be more productive throughout the day to where I'm not constantly going back and forth between the task I'm working on and then the administrative stuff as to relate it to what the quote you just read was.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to get to this, but in the book, because at the end of the day, everyone always says, burnout's bad. You want to avoid burnout, but very rarely does that warning come with any kind of constructive steps that you can take to actually avoid getting burnt out. Just like I'm sure in your quarterly review, I mean, I think it's a good thing that your supervisor pointed that out and said, maybe ease off the throttle a little bit so you don't get burnt out. But it's when you have to apply it and deal with the practical side of things, it's much more difficult to formulate how it is one does not get burnt out, or the way that you can avoid burnout. So essentially, Newport in this book has 3 steps or 3 mantras for avoiding burnout, and I'll list all 3 and then kind of go through each one on a deeper level. But those 3 things are: do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. That is the framework that he lies out. And so I'll immediately say, or preface that with, number 1, do fewer things. What he means is not work less. He articulates it in a way uh, to essentially make the argument that you need to reduce the number of simultaneous projects that you have at a certain time. And so I think what was helpful that he said was, you've got 2 kinds of work that needs to be done. You've got tasks and you've got projects. So that's how he categorizes it in this book. Tasks are things that you can get done in a single sitting. You sit down at your laptop and you can knock it out, whether it takes 1 hour or 4 hours. If you can do it in a single sitting, then it's considered a task. A project is essentially a whole list of tasks that need to be, it's an umbrella term for a bunch of tasks that would need to be checked off prior to the overall project being completed. Is that, I don't think there's much to disagree with on that at this point, Austin, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Uh, no, I mean it's a good framework. It's just how realistic is it to apply that in day to day life?
Yeah. And I will also say, so at the very beginning, I think in the introduction of this book, he says that these are tips helpful for people that do knowledge work. And I kind of alluded to it earlier, but knowledge work are the jobs where you're a little bit more in control of your schedule. You're maybe not being micromanaged 24/7. So think of your coders, your consultants, accountants, stuff like that, where you're having to use your brain for the output that you're being paid for, as opposed to, retail or menial labor, construction work, stuff like that is not going to be considered knowledge work. And he even goes so far in the introduction to say this is probably not going to be applicable to doctors or lawyers, because even though we have a little bit more autonomy in our actual schedules and can sort of define what our workday looks like, we're still judged, our performance is still judged based off of billable hours or number of patients that you can see in a single day. But I still got a lot of takeaways that I thought were applicable to the realm of being a lawyer. So that's kind of my one spiel on that. But in my mind, how I framed number one of, you know, do less work was how many active cases can one lawyer truly think deeply about? It's kind
Uh,
of
um,
I'm
uh,
throwing that out as a feeler to you.
and I'm just gonna give the typical lawyer response. It depends. How in depth are some of these cases? What kind of stuff are you dealing with? How urgent are some of the things? Are you waiting for the year-long separation period and just file a divorce, or is there an emergency custody and you got a hearing coming up Friday on the return? So I giving it, and also I'm so new. Everything seems like every additional case seems like, oh, this is going to put me over the edge. I don't know how much more I can handle, but I'm also not even at what I see other people in the firm are at. So clearly, it's taken me longer to do some things. I can't give you an exact number of what I think a realistic caseload would be.
Yeah. Well, and I was just trying to frame this particular conclusion that he has to our actual careers and day-to-day life. And as you're listening, if you're not a lawyer, perfectly fine, but try to apply what it is that this author is saying to your actual day-to-day life. Because in my mind, if you've got tasks and you got projects, I would view a project as a case. You know, it's not something you're gonna get done in a single sitting unless you're just drafting a will or something like that. But even that, you've got to sign, or you've got to schedule the signing with the client, all of that. So I think of our project is a case, and within that particular case, there's going to be a million tasks that you might not even know how many tasks are going to be set in that case at the time that it comes across your desk. But the the reason I asked that question is what this book is trying to drive home is realistically, how many cases, how many projects can you take on as an individual? And it's going to be different for everyone. Like Austin says, it's going to depend on you as an individual human being. But how many projects can you take on before you start to feel overwhelmed and burn yourself out? And a lot of the times you're not going to know that answer until it's too late, until you're already burnt out, in which case at that point it just becomes a lesson to learn from, and you've got to take a long hard look in the mirror and essentially say, I overdid it. I'm in over my head. It feels like I'm drowning on a day-to-day basis, and it might be okay to feel like that on one day, but if you're feeling like that 7 days out of the week, then uh, I think I think you've reached the capacity limit to look at yourself and say, this is my limit. And there's no shame in being in doing that. It just helps advise you later on in life to avoid that sort of issue.
What are
But
your thoughts on the initial question that you asked?
how many active cases can one lawyer truly think deeply about? So I do think that I think practically speaking, we've got a good case study in our particular field, because you've got government attorneys like assistant district attorneys or public defenders who on any given day they're moving through the entire docket. In some counties that might be 40 cases, and in metropolitan areas that might be 200 to 300 cases. You get into traffic court, and I worked as an ADA for a little bit. If you're in traffic court in a metropolitan area, the docket would quite literally be 800 cases in one day. There would be attorneys that came in that represented 80 clients at a single time, and they would there was one attorney in general who would bring in his cases on his iPad, and he would be there for hours just sitting there with one DA going through the list of tickets of driving citations and he would have quite literally 80 of the names on the 800 list, or on the 800 person docket. That's one side of the spectrum, and on the other side of the spectrum, you've got attorneys that are going to be your complex business litigation or corporate law, who they might only have one client, but that client is Coca-Cola or Apple, and their actual caseload might only be one case at a time, but that case is going to require every single brain cell that they have. And so that just further drives home your point of, it's going to depend who you are, what area you're practicing in, and
I
whether or
guess
not.
almost also what extra responsibilities you have.
Yeah.
Like if with that example you gave, an attorney with Coca-Cola, maybe they have some sort of a say so on the business aspect of it, where they're not solely focused on any litigation or lawsuits. They've got some sort of a say so in the business planning or whatever. And then like us starting this podcast, like that's something that may just take more out of us, just require more commitment to everything else.
Well, and that's another thing that's applicable to other careers as well. I like how he differentiates between administrative tasks and non-administrative tasks. So in our particular field, but it's applicable outside of the law, we've got billable hours is one way that a lawyer can be measured, versus administrative tasks, which means that what you're doing on this task is not going to earn the firm any money. It's purely administrative in nature, but it's not a useless task. It's training another attorney or a paralegal. It's doing something like this podcast where you're working on your personal brand. There's a whole slew of administrative tasks, and I think that they are necessary and important. However, it's all about balancing the ratio of administrative tasks versus the other ways that that your performance is measured in work.
Also, I
Okay.
just want to point out for the people that are going to be viewing this, can you tell the people why you are outdressing me? Just so people don't think I'm a slob. Let the people know why you had to flex on me.
Yeah, I'm actually glad. I meant to say that at the very beginning. This is not a habit that I'm wanting to particularly get into, is wearing a suit. I'm not doing it because this is a legal related podcast. My fiance, who works in the medical field, was invited to a auction gala dinner tonight, and I am her plus one. And we today is a Saturday when we are shooting this, and so quite literally, as soon as we wrap up here, I'm closing the camera, the laptop, getting in the car, and going to this gala. So just go, and this is what I'm having to wear. I think that goes without being said, but in case you thought I wasn't answering the question, that is why I'm dressed like this.
Kind of diabolical to not invite me as a third wheel. So just let Christina know I'm not happy with her.
I know, especially with an open bar and free food. That seems like a good place for you to, I won't finish
I'm
that
on
sentence.
I'm on a diet.
Um, okay. The second prong of this theory or hypothesis that Cal Newport lays out is work at a natural pace, which I think that you already alluded to, Austin, in saying that you feel like you're a slower kind of worker. I don't think, am I stating that, or?
No, that's like that is exactly how I do and would describe myself as a slower.
And this is another thing where everyone's going to be different, because some people perform better or prefer to perform under pressure, versus some people want to ensure that, I mean, they're going to go on their calendar and they're going to quite literally block out the time that they know it's going to take to perform any individual task, any individual project, etc. And so everyone's going to have a different preference and require more or less time for any given task. But with that being
Going
said,
off what you just oh sorry.
no, you're good. Jump in.
Off of what you were just saying, like while I am a slow worker, or I'm not a slow worker, I'm slow at completing my task. And I feel like the reason for that is when I'm doing a task, like regardless of what I'm doing, I'm extremely bad, and I acknowledge this, at going ahead and making the arguments against myself as to why I might be wrong. So I'll spend an excess amount of time making my argument, preparing my position. And then I'm also basically doing the other side's work and attacking my own position. I'm like, is my position that strong? And that's what causes me to slow down so much on tasks is I'm trying to like shore up any weakness in my position and anticipating arguments that the other side may not even make. But I also am someone that I need that deadline to get things done.
Yeah. Well, what you had just said prior to the deadline portion of being stuck in your head and making the opposite argument, stuff like that, goes to the I think that definitely goes to the third prong that we'll get to, which is obsess over quality. Which is to say that anything that you're putting your name on as your work product, all of these steps are to ensure that that is the best quality product that you could possibly put out, that it's a premium product. But you can't get to that step if you don't, Cal Newport would say, if you don't do less work and work at a natural pace. And those are the two steps that lead into having the actual time it takes to obsess over quality. So Cal Newport, obviously, the whole reason behind this book is because there is this push in modern culture towards hustle culture or grind culture. You he calls it pseudo productivity, which is the ideology of trying to maximize the amount of work and performance output that you can have on any given day. I'm sure you've probably seen Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, or TikToks of guys saying, you know, you're just not working hard enough. You need to grind. You need to be getting up at 4 a.m. and going to bed at midnight. Sleep less, work more, all that stuff. So this is Cal Newport's response to that mentality of hustle culture, and it's him pushing back against it. I like the way that he says this, and I uploaded the clip that I'm going to have you listen to. I just need to find which one it is. So to preface it, this is a clip that talks about oftentimes we think of the people that came before us, the greats or the legends of that we hold as icons in society. So your Galileos, your Thomas Edisons, um, Nikolai Tesla's, those sort of thinkers from before or around the Industrial Revolution. It kind of pays homage to them in the way that they live their lives versus how we as knowledge workers live our lives today. And Cal Newport draws a correlation between the way that they compose themselves on a day-to-day basis, so that essentially saying because they were not rushing to get anything done, that is why they were able to have the sort of ideas and invent the sort of products that they did. So with that being said, this is a clip from the audiobook. Oh, here we go.
Seen work. The great scientists of past eras would have found our urgency to be self-defeating and frantic. They were interested in what they produced over the course of their lifetimes, not in any particular short-term stretch. Without a manager looking over their shoulder or clients pestering them about responding to emails, they didn't feel pressure to be maximally busy every day. They were instead comfortable taking longer on projects and adopting a more forgiving and variable rhythm to their work. Above all else, these scientists tended to adopt a perspective on their professional efforts that was more philosophical than instrumental. In the Nicomachean Ethics, which would have been familiar to any serious thinker from the time of Copernicus onward, Aristotle identified deep contemplation as the most human and worthy of all activities. The general lifestyle of the scientist, by this logic, had a worthiness of its own, independent of any specific accomplishments in the moment.
Stop it there because that's the most applicable part. But he goes on to use that and talk about all these different thinkers who took the time required to just be still, to actually reflect on the thoughts in their mind at any given moment. There was not there were not millions of different things vying for their attention, distracting them. You know, phones were not invented. There was no email, no text messages, no angry girlfriends asking where you are. I've got your location. Why are you not home? You left, you know, you're supposed to leave at 5 o'clock. And so well, I guess before I move forward from that, Austin, what are your thoughts on it?
You addressed one of the things I was going to bring up is in today's society, it's hard not to have all of these constant distractions pinging you on your phone, email, laptop. Like, we're in a world of instant access to anything we could possibly need. The second question I have, because I obviously haven't read the book, I haven't listened to the book, and I'm unfamiliar with these stories with those people, but had they already reached success at this time to where they could take this time off, or is this whenever they're still trying, still trying to make it in whatever they're doing?
So that goes into one of the areas that I disagree with Cal Newport on throughout the book, because oftentimes he will allude to past historical figures that we now esteem to be very important for society. Two examples that pop into my mind immediately are, he talks about Benjamin Franklin's life, and he talks about Jane Austen's life. Jane Austen, if you don't know, is a prolific author, female author, who sort of paved the way for female authors in society. And so he, even though Cal Newport dedicates the majority of this book to talking about how important it is to step back and reflect on your thoughts, your life circumstances, to work at a natural pace. He oftentimes, even though he discussed Benjamin Franklin's whole life and the moments and years leading up to Benjamin Franklin, air quotes, discovering electricity, and the infamous, or the famous picture of him flying a kite with I think it's a key tied to the end of it, and it getting struck by lightning or something like that. But he also talks about Benjamin Franklin's early life and how absolutely busy and stressful it was, and how he was running 2 or 3 different print shops in 3 different states. He had a print shop that did publishing in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and then he opened up a second location in Georgia, and then a third one somewhere, I believe. And he was constantly having to travel between all these different print shops, and he was a business owner, not quite yet an entrepreneur, not anywhere close to being a political figure, but he was a business owner. And that brought about with it, based on how Cal Newport recounts, a very busy, stressful, chaotic schedule. But Cal Newport kind of just overlooks that and draws the conclusion of, it wasn't until his later years, his more formative years, that he had the means to step back and do some deeper thinking and contemplation, and run the sort of experiments that he was wanting to with electricity. And therefore, because he slowed down, that's what led to his great inventions, or this discovery of electricity, but kind of neglects to pay attention to the fact that he would not have been able to put himself in that situation to reflect and take more time to work at a natural pace if he hadn't built this publishing empire that produced enough revenue for him to take a step back and to delegate the work to managers that he hired, and buy himself freedom to do the thinking required for these inventions. And so I kind of came up with my own theory as to how one can achieve slow productivity, and it's a little bit different than Cal Newport. But I would say, I don't know. Do you think it's a good time for me to talk about it now, or later? I mean, I don't want to forget about bringing it up.
Might as well bring it up now then.
I
I don't know what you're going to say. Might as well bring it up.
I just feel like slow productivity is the optimal goal that any person can reach in their career. But to get there, it requires a little bit of hustle and bustle on the front end. It requires a little bit more stress, a little bit more uh, running around feeling like a chicken with their head cut off is the metaphor that comes to my head immediately. But if you put in the work, in the hustle on the front end, then the reward is the ability to take a step back, to delegate work to others, and to earn yourself the freedom to achieve slow productivity in your workflow. Am I explaining that correctly, how I think of that?
I'm understanding what you're saying. I don't know if I can say if it's correct or not. That's what
No,
you're
no, no. I'm
thinking.
not asking for
Yeah.
accuracy. I'm just, in my mind, I found myself pushing back against. I don't think a first year legal or law associate has the ability to do slow productivity, not starting right off the bat when you're trying to build a caseload, do consults, maintain your caseload, go to court, stay in contact with all your current clients. It's I think once you work yourself up to a junior partner or a shareholder at a firm, I think slow productivity is something that is much more attainable and reasonable in a day-to-day workflow, but certainly not something that when you're fresh out of law school is is not attainable, but it's not a reasonable expectation for how work should go on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's applicable to any career field. I think we as humans have this urge to prove ourselves, not only to our coworkers or our supervisors, but to ourselves, to prove ourselves to ourselves so that we can believe in ourselves and feel confident going into whatever it is, whether it's a case or if you're a surgeon going into a particular kind of surgery. You've got to build your resume, your metaphorical, intangible resume to yourself. That way it's a foundation on which you can stand upon and essentially go forth and conquer from there. That's how I view it in my mind.
And I see it very similarly to how you're viewing it. That if you come into something new, any new job, whatever it is, and you try to implement the slow productivity, it's just hard for me to imagine that person immediately being able to move up very quickly in a job to get to a place where they can have that be able to work at their natural pace. And then one other thing that you were talking about that when talking about Ben Franklin that had me thinking is it seems like initially like he had a business of the printing press or whatever he was doing. And then later on, whenever he has this more free time, he's not doing as many, I guess, menial, repetitive tasks of printing pressing. He's allowed to get more creative with what he's trying to do. He's trying to do things that haven't been done before. And I think that's one thing that I don't know if the book discusses that or not, but when working productive or with working slow and slow productivity, I think that also gives you more freedom to think outside the box, take some risks, and get more creative with whatever you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is the point of the book. I don't know if my thought process ever got us there, but you haven't even read it, and through natural deduction alone, you're able to.
I keep jumping ahead on you. It's unreal.
Well, before we move to the last one, or the last pillar, which is obsess over quality, one thing that came up in the second tier of work at a natural pace, you're not going to believe this. I was kind of awestruck and dumbfounded when this came up. The author gives two remedies or exercises that can help you better assist you working at a natural pace. And the way that what he calls these are, one is called office hours and one is called a docket clearing meeting. So office hours is what you talked about earlier. He said that he calls it office hours because he's not only is he an author, but he is a professor, an adjunct professor. And just like all professors, when they're going through the syllabus, they'll say, my office hours are this day and this day from this hour to this hour. And my door will be open. You can come in at any time, ask questions about homework, assignments, whatever, or just chit chat about life. But he essentially says you need to block on your calendar office hours and make your coworkers, your clients, your patients, whatever, aware of what your office hours are at the outset. Essentially saying, I'll be available these days at these times to answer text messages, to answer calls, to send emails, all that kind of stuff, which is what you talked about earlier. And by pulling it all together to a 1 or 2 hour, block on your calendar, that opens up the rest of your day to essentially get the deep work done that needs to be done and to do it at a natural pace. And then, so for the second one, this is what blew my mind. He calls it a docket clearing meeting. Didn't blow my mind conceptually because it was a new idea, but because you might recognize this from our firm through a different title. We don't call them docket clearing meetings. We call them case reviews because he essentially says, he's not a lawyer and has never done legal work or worked for a law firm, but he says docket clearing meetings are meetings composed where instead of wasting a bunch of time and having to fragment your mind and thinking process by tackling a project or a task, emailing back and forth or texting back and forth or making several calls, he said just set a meeting either virtually on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or in person with your coworkers, and the same amount of time and stress that it's going to cause by handling this task over email is going to be completely eliminated by you just sitting down in a room with this person and going over what needs to be done, because he essentially says that it is the sheer act of talking about a task rather than just doing the task that makes our schedules feel busier than they actually need to be. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. I don't know if you're the same as me, but whenever you see case review on your calendar, you get a little bit of anxiety when you see that because you're like, I know something's going to come up here and be like, I've been avoiding this task. I know it's got something that's got to be done.
Well, explain what
It's,
a case review is from the legal perspective, in case there's anyone here that's not a lawyer.
okay, I'll speak on it for myself. In my office, I have a case manager named Devin, not Devin Thorpe. A lot of people do get the two confused. So every 2 weeks we have on the calendar where we have a meeting where her and I will sit down and we'll go through our every client I have or that we have. We go through alphabetically and just kind of update what needs to be done in the case, see what the status of the case is, check on any tasks that we have assigned, whether they're overdue or upcoming, and we go through the entirety of our client list that way. And also in doing that, we prioritize. So it's a nice refresher of where you are with each of your cases. You get to touch on them, get a nice little refresher on what's going on, but it also allows you, it almost never fails. Like it adds a bunch more work to your schedule because you're updating tasks and adding more things that need to be done to those cases. So that can get overwhelming, but it's hard not to leave a case review feeling at least a little bit better because you're able to prioritize all of these tasks that you've had on your mind in the ether and bring them to the forefront. Like, okay, I've scheduled out a time to get this done.
Yeah. I agree with that assessment, and the reason for me that it makes me stress seeing it on my calendar is I'm like, well, damn, I don't know, I don't even think I've gotten my task done from the last case review. It's still sitting there pending, or it's overdue, and tomorrow I've got to sit down and be able to set a new task in this case. So that means I better get my ass going on the already set task in this case. So
And one
um,
other thing with that is when I first started, like I knew the importance of case review from being an intern at the firm and like sitting in on other attorneys and their case manager meetings or case reviews. And when I first started, like I felt like I was so behind. It was hard for me to justify being like, this is going to take 2.5 hours of time that I should be or could be drafting, getting back to clients, whatever else, that I have to stop whatever I'm doing and prioritize this review and touch on all my cases. But even in having to stop whatever I'm doing or whatever task I'm in the middle of, you leave the case review knowing what needs to be done. It almost gets you out of a little bit of a burnout, gives you a kick in the butt. Like I've got what I need to do. It's sitting in front of me. I just talked about it. It gives you a path to move forward.
yeah, I think what you're alluding to uh, during a portion of that is decision fatigue. So whether you're a lawyer or just any kind of professional, a lot of the times a career or a job requires you to make what feels like 1,000 micro decisions on a daily basis. And all of that compounds into what is discussed as decision fatigue. But that's not the only, tier that you're sort of depleting. You've also got emotional labor, especially in family law, which is what we deal with, where you're carrying other people's stress. And you've got identity fusion, which is where the line becomes blurred and your productivity becomes your worth. So you tell yourself, I'm only as good as how much whatever I get done, or however many tasks, however many billable hours, however many sales I make, how many clients I bring in, whatever, whatever X, Y, and Z are. The move towards slow productivity is trying to dissociate who you are as a person and your identity from your productivity or your performance, so that way on the days that your productivity might not be there, you don't have to be so hard on yourself and you can forgive yourself or give yourself some grace.
I also just want to bring up, it looks like we have 11 minutes before you got to get on the road.
Okay. We're going to wrap this up and bring this to the last point, which is obsess over quality, which kind of essentially uh, speaks for itself. And we already touched on it earlier. I've got to hit the road here soon for the gala, and I don't want um, my fiance to beat my ass for being late. So, Austin, what are some ways that you obsess over quality of the work that you're turning in, other than what you mentioned earlier? So taking the time to think through the counter arguments and stuff like that.
Early on, it was hard for me not to obsess over just small stuff, as small as sending an email to opposing counsel, making sure there's no typos, make sure I'm getting my point across clearly, and then just reviewing everything to make sure there's no mistakes, typos, formatting errors, stuff like that. I would hyperfixate on more so than may be needed.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think one thing that Cal Newport talks about is things like going for walks. It's a constant recurring theme or exercise that he brings up, even when he's talking about these prolific historical figures, where he will talk about the importance of them going for walks. As simple as that sounds, and you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, what is a walk going to do for me? But a walk with no stimulation, so you're not listening to a podcast or listening to music or on a phone call, a walk taken just for the point of going for a walk and encountering your thoughts, is beneficial in the sense of it gives you the time needed to obsess over quality, to think through what your next step is going to be, what tasks need to be done. My father has this planner, and I can't think of the name of the planner. Right, I think it's Franklin, but don't quote me on that. It's essentially the first time block of any given day is called P and Q. P and Q time. P and Q stands for peace and quiet. And this is the time of the day that you allocate yourself to plan the rest of your day. And that's to be done in silence. Your screen's not open yet. You're just sitting there rummaging through, the dumpster fire of your thoughts and trying to allocate priority. And the way that this planner does it is you've got different tiers of priority. It starts with A1, A2, A3. These are your non-negotiables, what you have to get done this day. Then you move to B1, B2, B3, and then C1, C2, on and on and on. And you list the more important ones at the top, but A1 is always P and Q, peace and quiet time. And that allows you to organize the rest of your day. Not saying that you're going to get all of these things done, but that you're at least going to prioritize them with a sense of urgency that they essentially demand for any respective task that you have for that day. I think that helps obsess over the quality of what you're working on, because you go into your day knowing not only what needs to be done, but it's what level of importance is assigned to it.
That's something I 100% do myself. Like whenever I'm walking Bambi, a lot of the times now I don't have headphones in. Like I'm just existing, thinking. A lot of the times I find myself in the car these days like a psycho with no music on, no podcast on, anything. Like I don't want the stimulation. I want that time for me to think, because it's the first time probably in the day that I've got a chance to just be intentional about my thinkings for that day, rather than trying to analyze and think ahead for so many. Whatever's in front of me, whatever's on my laptop, whatever is happening in a conversation I'm having. So
Yeah.
that's something I 100% agree with and do myself.
Did you prepare a quote for this week?
You know I did.
All right. Then the last question I have for you before the quote is, do you think burnout is a personal failure or a structural problem? Is it the society that we're living in, or does it fall on the individual um, when dealing with burnout, or pointing a finger to blame?
I don't know if I have a great answer to that because I think it could be honestly either one. Like for me, I feel like a lot of it is self-induced burnout. Like I probably could cut some things off and not go through some of the rabbit holes I go down that cause me to have to get it to work early some days or stay late some days. If I knew when, like, okay, you're at the point you need to be, you've got the answer you needed, you're prepared. At some point, you just gotta get up, be ready to go. But also structurally or like systematically, there is like the culture, especially in a legal profession, to you've got to get after it nonstop. You're not expected to have you're gonna be in one of two lines of thought basically. Lawyers work till lunch, then go golf, or lawyers are gonna work the entirety of the day. They're gonna be on a laptop, on the phone 24/7. They're gonna be doing something. So I think there's also a structural aspect as well.
Yeah, I agree
I
with
don't I don't have a great answer for you.
So what you would say is it depends.
That I almost led with that, but I can't use it twice in the same podcast.
All right. All right, go ahead and share your quote and then we'll wrap up.
I had one written down, but I actually have one pulled up that I feel like this is why I was zoning out. I have one pulled up on my laptop that I actually may like better. Ooh, I thought I had it pulled up. I think this one, I literally saw it on Instagram last night on Reels, and it just feels way more applicable to today's podcast rather than what I had. And it's an Abraham Lincoln quote, and it says, "I'm a slow walker, but I never walk back." Before I give my thoughts, I want you to give your thoughts on what that means.
That's almost miraculously applicable to this podcast, and I can't believe that you said you found that last night.
Last night, I had a bunch of things saved, like on my Instagram Reels, and before we got on the podcast, I wrote one down that was different because I didn't know what the book was exactly about. But I'm like, I know this is saved, and I just happened to look up. I just literally looked at the Lincoln quote that came up last night.
I'm a slow walker, but I never walk backwards.
Yes.
That's good. That's actually really, really good in a lot of different ways that I don't even have the time to talk about right now. What was going through your head when it popped up?
I maybe incorrectly, maybe that's something that I see in myself and my decision making. Uh, it's I don't often come to a decision very quickly, but when I do, hopefully I'm not having to go back and backtrack because of mistakes I've made. Like I luckily or hopefully I'll have done the preparation needed, taking the time required to really think about what I'm about to be doing to where I'm not having to go back and fix a ton of things the longer I'm going. I'm consistently moving forward. It may not be at the fastest pace as some people, but I'm moving forward and not having to retrace my steps along the way.
And I love it because for those of you listening who don't know this, Abraham Lincoln was a practicing attorney for the majority of his life, 25 plus years. And that process seemed to work out pretty well for him. At least I feel like it did. But he was a practicing attorney and ended up being president. So there might be more than what meets the eye in terms of slow productivity. And um, although I'm sure that there were times that Abraham Lincoln had to sprint from point A to point B in his personal and professional life, it's always a good reminder that he wasn't afraid to take a slow walk every now and again. Drops mic. You good?
Shuts laptop for weekend.